The polling is getting so bad for the Liberals going into the next federal election that at this point I would just advise them, if I was an advisor to the Liberals, that they should effectively just try and throw in the towel as early as possible, hold a snap election, lose it really fast so then they can get past this Trudeau era of the Liberal Party. Holding on for another 2 years is not going to benefit them at all. Right now, if anything, if they hold on, they're just going to have more voters resenting the fact that they just held on as long as humanly possible while delivering policies that nobody wants in any way, shape, or form. Right, like the reason why I think that would actually help them is the polling is getting so bad. If they fall any further, Justin Trudeau would be at risk of performing as bad, if not worse, as Michael Ignatieff did in 2011. So at least by getting the election out of the way now, maybe he can ride high and have like a 24% turnout on election day in terms of the voter percentage. They can win some seats. They can hold on to most of the stuff that they have, and they can move on with a new leader. Justin Trudeau can tip his hat to people and then go on a beach vacation for the rest of his life. That would be the smart thing for the Liberals to do. And I know some people don't like me giving advice to the Liberals, but don't worry, they're never going to actually listen to me. That would be a smart thing to do, and the Liberals are not exactly on board with doing smart things these days. But I want to go to the polling because I, for the longest time, had been saying, yeah, the Conservatives are ahead anywhere from 7 to 14 points. How wrong was I? I had not actually checked in on a lot of the recent polling for a long time, and I kept saying that 7 to 14 kind of range. Right now, it's more like a 12 to 18 or 22% lead. A Nanos poll just came out, and the Conservatives have a 22-point lead over the Liberals, and the Liberals are almost doing as bad as the NDP. 22% for the NDP and 20% for the NDP, 22% for the Liberals. That's scary because that could be a range where the Liberals might win less seats than the NDP, because the NDP is one of those parties that has very concentrated votes in university towns on some very union-heavy industrial sort of centers like Hamilton and whatnot. But the Liberals have kind of like a very thinly spread smear of voters. They have a much more efficient voter base than the Conservatives because they have a lot of concentration in certain provinces where the Conservatives can win, seats anywhere in Canada, but it's a little bit more difficult for them. But right now, the Liberals might be competing to see if they're going to fall into third place like they did under Ignatieff, this time under Trudeau. And imagine that. You have the name recognition, the brand recognition of the Trudeaus, and you're failing this hard an election where you have the media on your side, you have a lot of like the nonprofit groups on your side, you have even foreign interference on your side, and you somehow cannot claw your way within 10 points of the Conservatives. You're literally 22 points behind. That is basically a complete rejection of the Liberals by their own base. If even the Liberals were able to hold on to most of their voters, they wouldn't be doing this bad. This is signaling that all they have left is the orange liberal hyper-progressive base. Any voters who are voting for the Liberals because they kind of liked the economic policies have fully abandoned them at this point. And this is where I've said multiple times, the Liberals cannot get rid of Justin Trudeau. It doesn't matter how bad he's doing. Right now, the party's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Justin Trudeau has a very strong social progressive base. It's not strong enough to even come close to winning an election, but it's what keeps him in power in the Liberals. So if the Liberals try and swap out for a Mark Carney or a Chrystia Freeland, they lose the hyper-progressive base because they basically follow Justin Trudeau around like a cult leader. But if they swapped in a Mark Carney, yeah, they could win back some Liberal voters who for some reason are just against voting Conservative and will only do it if Trudeau's still the leader. They'll win some of those people, but a lot of the hyper-progressives might then go and vote for Jagmeet Singh, which might actually allow the NDP to dig a little bit into sort of downtown Toronto more. But, the Liberals aren't going to do that. They're effectively, what they should do is just let Trudeau lose a very fast election, like I said, and then basically say, hey, it's a new era for the Liberal Party. It won't be. They're still going to be awful. But they can pretend like we've moved on to a new era by getting rid of Trudeau in a very fast election. If they drag it out, people are only going to see them as just some horribly out of touch legacy party who was holding on to power because they know Canadians don't want them around. That's what killed social credit in BC and Alberta back in the day, is that they really didn't have any reason to exist anymore. And rather than giving people a fast election, then reforming themselves very quickly for the next election, they end up holding on with a death grip to their governments in those areas. And then people just saw them as just some legacy party that has no real reason to stick around anymore. Anyways, I just want to go into some of the other polling, because with this Nanos poll, there's also an Abacus data poll that I'm going to be talking about later today on the Richard Serrett show. I believe it's an hour. So in an hour, if I put out this video, tune in at 5:15 Eastern time to listen to me. But here's the Abacus data poll: 40% conservatives, 26% liberals. So they're doing a little bit better on this one than in the Nanos poll. But look at the seat projections: 204 seats for the conservatives, with a 77% swing in favor of the conservatives. 87 seats are going to be lost by the liberals. And wow, that's pretty horrifying. This one shows the NDP doing worse, but those extra few points, like those 4% higher polling in this poll compared to the Nanos one, is going to capture the Liberals a lot of seats. It's kind of that crossover point. If you can cross over 20% decisively, that's when you start getting dozens of extra seats. When you're kind of around that 20 and below area, that's when you can only win a couple dozen seats, and that's really it, because your vote's very, very concentrated, unless you're the Bloc, where you only run in Quebec. But the great thing for here with the polling right now, is that the Conservatives do not have to rely on the Bloc whatsoever for votes. Remember, they were the ones who held up the vote, and they voted down the motion to get rid of the carbon tax on all home heating. You cannot rely on ally with the Bloc, because at the end of the day, they're more loyal to the Quebec provincial government. So if the Quebec provincial government has a carbon tax like it does, they are not going to get rid of the carbon tax federally, because that would be benefiting English Canada over French Canada. And that's the only thing that they really stand for in Parliament, is just keeping this incredibly slanted balance, where Quebec always has to benefit more than the rest of the country, or they're going to, storm out of the room upset. I do want to plug David Coletto from the Abacus data. I think they're one of the better pollsters out there for looking up popularity numbers of the leaders and different polling. So make sure to follow him on Twitter or X. But here's the actual polling from all the firms over the past, a month and a half or so. The lowest I can find is plus 11 for the Conservatives, and the highest now we have is the Nanos numbers with plus 22. The Liberals just don't have a chance of getting back. And that's why it's actually very good that we have Pierre Poilievre now outwardly coming out, when he was touring Richmond Hill, saying that he is affirmatively against gender theory in schools. He doesn't just vaguely stand for parental rights. He specifically stands against the thing that the parental rights movement is going after. That being SOGI 123, all of the hyper-progressive sexual ed content being injected into the classroom. And I just want to take a side note here, because I'm running for the Conservative nomination for Calgary-Signal Hill. So shameless plug, vote for me if you live in that riding, or get any of your friends and family in that area, sign up and vote for me. But I had someone on one of the ads I was running in the area saying that I was being creepy because I want SOGI 123 of the classroom, and because I don't want this sexual ed content being taught in the classroom because of how disgusting it is. And they're like, this is the liberal frame of mind of how to argue whenever you've been caught pushing a bad policy. They're like, that's creepy that you're talking about sex ed being taught to children. Oh, why are you caring about all the sexual content being taught to children? That's weird. I'm like, I'm literally the one saying we shouldn't teach it because it's highly inappropriate. But the Liberals are only good at projection. So if you complain about something that they're doing, then you're playing this is culture war politics. This is very divisive. This is very bad. But if the Liberals are dividing people, then it's very good, because they're dividing out all the divisive people. But if you call them out for dividing people, then you're being divisive. It's incredibly obnoxious, but that's just how it goes in Canada these days. They have no arguments left, so their only argument is to basically call hypocrite, or basically say that you're being divisive, you're unkind, you're mean. Are our policies bad? Oh, who cares about policies? You're being terrible and evil and awful. Why? Oh, because we oppose the policies that the Liberal government passed that have been complete failures or have been dividing Canadians. Whatever. It's just so annoying. Anyways, but I liked this little poll that also came out from the Abacus numbers, and this is why I like Abacus a lot. They do really interesting stuff like this. These were people who voted Liberal in 2021 who now have a negative impression of Justin Trudeau. And I think this is the buttons that the Conservative Party needs to be pushing on. 77% of them said that they're just tired of them. 86 said he doesn't have a clear vision for the country, and 91 said he's inauthentic and phony. That's where I think that the main one here that they need to push on is the fact that Justin Trudeau's entire program has failed, and that he effectively is taking the country nowhere. This is where, not that you should exactly market it exactly that way, always just talk about the policy failures, but this is what I've talked about in other videos when I say why the Conservatives lost in 2021, 2019, and 2015, but the Conservatives won in 2011. In 2011, the Conservatives had a small government vision for Canada and were calling out the Liberals like Nadia for just visiting or that they're just being disruptive. They're mad because they don't form the majority and they're trying to put together this ridiculous coalition government. That worked well. Basically, it's left-wing parties trying to hijack the government even though nobody elected them in large numbers. And then by the time they go to 2015, Trudeau now has the momentum because the Harper campaign, in my opinion, ran a very much keep us in power because the other guys aren't as good as us. That's not compelling. You have to have a vision. And as silly as the Sunny Ways slogan is, it's very good marketing because it's saying, I'm a breath of fresh air, I'm transparent, and the Harper government, by contrast, is dark and insular. That was very good. But the Conservatives couldn't win back power in 2019 and 2021 because the campaign was just, hey, Justin Trudeau's not that great. He's like, yeah, he sucks. And then 2021, we're like, let's secure the future. And Trudeau's been indecisive and he should have mandated vaccines harder like Aaron O'Toole's campaign was, and that we disagree with his carbon tax and we have our own carbon tax. Like, that's not a vision. That's a pivot. No one's voting for the Conservatives for a pivot vision. You need to actually give a vision that says, like Poilievre's been doing and a lot of other candidates for the Conservatives have been doing, is that we want a country with less extremists in it who are laundering money. We want smaller government. We want parents running we want parents raising their own kids, not schools, and all this stuff. That's highly popular. You paint a vision of a better world where people are able to control everything themselves. They can start a small business with the government killing it during the lockdowns or through regulations. You sort of paint a picture of people being very decisive in their own lives, that people can do what they want. Whereas in 2019 and 2021, it was like what I would call a very commerce-based approach to politics. It's saying, hey, we'll give you $50 if you put your kids in soccer. You'll get this tax credit if you do this. Hey, we'll have this small business government grant program. It's so bureaucratic and like bloated and sweaty way of doing politics. It's not that, hey, we're going to lower taxes so you can get along with your own life. It's you get to go on a government website and fill out a bunch of forms, and by some bureaucrat, hopefully not messing it up, you might get a little bit money back on your taxes. That's not a vision. That's bureaucracy. Who cares? I don't want to vote. Like, that's why I was happy O'Toole lost in 21, because if O'Toole won, the Conservatives would have only had a minority government that maybe would have lasted a year and a half, and then the Liberals would have probably come back because Aaron O'Toole had no vision, and he would have immediately tainted the Conservative brand as basically being this Mulrooney-esque diet liberal kind of approach to politics. It was very divisive, so I'm happy he lost so then we could have Pierre Poilievre. But going forward now, I think what needs to happen is that the Conservatives definitely should not fall into the gear of saying, okay, let's calm down, let's act governmental, let's have Pierre Poilievre be more prime ministerial. The reason he's gotten popular is he's calling out all the nonsense from the Trudeau era without reservation. The problem with O'Toole and Scheer was that their criticisms were almost sort of backhanded a little bit. It wasn't a direct criticism. It's basically saying, when I say backhanded, I mean backhanded to Conservatives. It's basically saying, no, Conservatives, your criticisms of Trudeau aren't correct. It's actually that, he's phony. He's not authentic. Oh, he's not listening to people. It's like, who cares? I wouldn't care if my politician wasn't listening to me, if he was doing all the right things, the economy was good. The problem is that Justin Trudeau is actually a very vile, narcissistic person who doesn't care if he's bankrupting Canadians. That's what you have to do it. He thinks that parents are extremists. That's what you have to call him out for. Not just that we have a competing vision or something like that, and that he needs to be nicer. Who cares if he's not nice? He's wrong. That's why he's awful. He's a wrong, narcissistic dweeb who will not actually who's basically holding on to power in spite of the fact that nobody likes his policies anymore. That's what you have to do when you're marketing against him. But anyways, hopefully you don't hate listening to me ramble, but I have my normal Give, Send, Go legal fundraiser in the description of this video, linked there if you want to throw in $5, $50, maybe $1,000. I'm just kidding. But someone actually did give me $300, and that blew my mind. I'm very thankful for that. But I have my legal case still going on with this billionaire. It's a stupid defamation case. I feel like I'm getting very close to winning it. He didn't even submit evidence barely during the evidence submission phase. It was like he submitted his LinkedIn profile as evidence. It's completely ridiculous. So if you want to contribute to that, it really helps me pay for costs. This thing's now cost me over $20,000 at this point. And what else you can do to help me out is if you live in Calgary-Signal Hill, buy a Conservative Party membership to vote for me, or get any of your friends and family who also live in the riding to sign up and vote for me whenever the nomination race comes up. We want to make sure we have real Conservatives, so make sure to vote for me, number one, or Michael Kim, number two, for the riding, because there's a lot of red Tories and failed MLAs running in the area, and I'd really like us to have, fresh Conservatives who actually stand for conservatism, not just constantly, dividing up policy and running on sort of half principles like, oh, I oppose the carbon tax. Who cares? The carbon tax is obviously awful. It's not a statement, but people who don't support parental rights, who don't support gun rights, who don't want to get rid of the anti-free speech regime that Justin Trudeau's erected, all this other stuff, we have to get rid of it. We have to completely clear out the vision. And if a Conservative doesn't want to do that, they shouldn't be elected as a Conservative nominee. You cannot, if Trudeau's era was so bad for Canadians, you do not want candidates around who will only dismantle little bits and pieces of it and then leave the rest in place. That's not fighting for a new good status quo. That's just fighting for the status quo 4 years ago. It's pathetic whenever I see Conservatives basically say, oh yeah, I think that some of the Trudeau's policies over the past couple of years have been really bad. I'm like, I don't want to just go back to Canada of 4 years ago. I'd like to go back to Canada of like 15 years ago when, Harper was in power, or even before that, actually having a small business status quo rather than a very fat, bloated, bureaucratic, commerce-based government that kicks Canadians in the shins on social issues and then gives them back a couple tax credits to try and make them happy. I just want a flat-out small government that competes with the likes of Florida and Texas for economic migrants rather than competing with the rest of Canada's bloated governments. Other than that, hopefully I've not rambled now way too much even in the end of this video. Hopefully you'll actually watch the next one I come out with. Hopefully these are not feeling too long. But regardless, I'll see you guys next time.